Everybody, those of you that are here in the room, we're glad you're here, and those that are watching on AGP either live or in a rebroadcast, this will be available on YouTube for reviewing and viewing. We'll probably get it up in about 48 hours, so it can be accessed on YouTube. I'm Dave Buckingham. I'm the city manager here in the city of Morro Bay. I'm going to let these fine gentlemen introduce themselves next.
Good evening. I'm Rob Livick. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Morro Bay.
I'm Mike Nunley with MKN and Associates. I'm the Program Manager for the Water Reclamation Facility.
I'm Matt Thomas with Black & Veatch. We prepared the facility master plan that we'll be reviewing tonight.
And I'm John Rickenbach, and I'm the Deputy Program Manager for the project.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to just give a quick welcome sort of overview of where we are in the process and then turn it over to some of the experts here to keep moving on. So we are continuing on in our process to build a new water reclamation facility here in the city of Morro Bay. The process has been ongoing, depending on how you count it, for a number of years. But in June of this past year, the City Council, after substantial community input, identified a preferred site for the water reclamation facility at the South Bay Boulevard site. Following that, we started the facility master planning process and the environmental review process. And where we are tonight is we have the draft facility master plan complete and ready for presentation to the community. And for those of you that have been participating in and tracking this process as it's been going along, this has really been sort of the key step awaited, because until you have a facility master plan, you're not really sure exactly what your project is, because it's the facility master plan that assesses the requirements and factors into that the goals of the project, and then the output from that is both the engineering assessment, the design possibilities, and the cost, the refined cost estimates, really the first clear cost estimates for a project. So now we've got the facility master plan, our environmental, and this master plan is what the environmental review process will be based upon. So now that there's a project description, the environmental review process can move forward. We expect that to be complete late next summer, early fall, and then approved by the council by late 2017. And then we'll be into design in 2018 and construction in 2019-20. And we are on timeline, on our 5-year timeline, which started in June of this year, to have a complete project in June of 2021. So with that overview, I'm going to turn it over to John Rickenbach to start through the presentation. We've got a fairly detailed, but hopefully not too overly detailed presentation. And we made a determination not to do a 2-hour presentation and capture every nuance, but to hit the highlights and then look forward to answering questions from the community. And also, I think I probably failed to hit the most important thing of this is the first. We received the final draft master plan from Black & Veatch 2 days ago. And so this is the first opportunity to roll it out to the community in this public workshop. We're looking forward to getting feedback on this plan in all of the various aspects of it, from the engineering piece to the technology to the design to odor control to cost, all of those things, to get that feedback, and then we'll take that to the Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee on December the 6th. And so the WRFCAC will formally receive this draft on December the 6th, and then a week later on December the 13th, the City Council will review the draft master plan in their council meeting on December the 13th. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I think Dave hit on many of the things that I was going to talk about, including schedule and some background. So I'm going to go through those very quickly, if at all. I do want to let you know how we see this playing out and your role over the next few weeks and into the next year in this process, because that's really important. First of all, we do have till 8 o'clock. We intend to stop talking up here by let's say 7 o'clock or a little bit after that, because we want to have enough time for questions that you may have. We're not going to hit on every point, but when questions come up, we've got information to try to answer many of your questions. We can't anticipate all your questions. In anticipation of that concept, we do want to give you a little bit of background how we got to the facility we have and the siting that we have. And Matt's going to give you a lot of the details relative to the site itself and the technologies and how we were responding to city goals. But also, we would imagine one of the key considerations is cost and what that means to you in terms of your rates and how that will play out and where we're at in that process. Mike's going to spend some time on that topic. And even then, things are, right now in the early stages of getting this all figured out. It's also important, Dave hit on the one idea that this is the facility master plan, a very key component of the project description for the EIR that will look at the impacts of doing this. The other part of that is the master reclamation plan, the water reclamation plan, which we're developing right now, which we expect to have done in March in a draft form. And the EIR will look at that as well. So there's a lot of information we're just bringing to the fore. We're very excited to be able to do that today. The place to start, as we always do, is and why we are doing this all derives from the community's goals that were set back in 2013, and the council adopted those goals. And the facility master plan has to respond to those. It's a question of whether they're all implemented or not, but right now we just want to tell you how the facility master plan is addressing those. The key consideration is producing high-quality, tertiary, disinfected water, wastewater. That really is a driver for everything else. It's got to be high quality because we intend to reuse it, and the FMP is addressing that. And of course, cost effectiveness is a big deal too. So we do want to talk about how costs are being derived in potential areas where savings could occur and how we intend to address that through the plan. On-site composting was another potential goal that council wanted us to look at and the community wanted us to look at. We have looked at that in some depth, and I think we've made a pretty preliminary and pretty certain determination that doing it on-site doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's really, it can be done more effectively and cost-effectively regionally, so that's something that the FMP does address to some extent, but not in great detail. The potentially for energy recovery on the site was another goal, and that one means, do you create energy there? Do you make it self-sufficient? Solar panels would be one obvious kind of thing, and the FMP facility master plan does address that to some extent. And is there a potential cost savings by energy recovery on the site? Treating for contaminants of emerging concern, medical wastes and such is something that we want to make sure that this plant can do. And again, that's one of the high-end technologies that we want to incorporate into the plant. The possibility for allowing other municipal uses. People have talked about things, corporation yard is a word people use, but there's other things that have been mentioned in the past. Is there an opportunity, since we're doing a facility out here, to do other city facilities out here? It's not technically part of the facility master plan or the water reclamation facility, but it's something we want the facility master plan to account for the possibility of doing until we're at a position where we either do other things or we don't. So that's how that's addressed in the facility master plan. We'll get into more detail in a bit. Ensuring neighborhood compatibility is a big deal. And it's one reason we've landed out here at the South Bay Boulevard site after a lot of community input through a very extensive siting process, and we feel very good about where we're at. Now, it's not perfect. Obviously, there's people who are going to have concerns wherever you go, but it's a key consideration. And the last one, most importantly, is being operational within 5 years. We're on schedule to do that. It's always been an effort to do that from the time we've got a site selected for study, which was in June of this year, and we're on target to do that. Kind of want to hit on a few points there. I don't want to go through this except for to say this is a timeline up here on the screen of things we've done in the past since the Coastal Commission in 2013 said you really need to look for another place to build a wastewater facility. And if you can, recycling water is a big deal there. So we've gone through a lot to get to this point today, including studying many sites over a number of reports in 2014 and at 2015, considering the potential of going to the California Men's Colony and studying whether that made sense, and looking at various sites in the Morro Valley, because that made a lot of sense at one time because we focused on reclamation there, and ultimately landing here, which was a site we'd been looking at from the beginning as well. And the point here being that these things happen over many months and in a couple of years, and a lot of input to get to where we are. So we feel good about how that's worked out. And so here now, the council did select South Bay Boulevard to look at in more depth in June. And so since then, we've been doing some technical work, which I want to point out here, some technical studies on the site. Black and Veatch has been doing a lot of work relative to the facility master plan, even last year, on technologies, how different processes, and now they've been applying that to this site in the last few months. And ultimately, we held an EIR scoping meeting, that is to say what issues we want to look at in the environmental impact report, critical issues over the next year. And then last month, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the property owner that if the city goes forward at South Bay Boulevard, that we could purchase that site or a piece of that site that we would need to do this facility. So the pieces are getting into place now. Over the next, and now here we are presenting the facility master plan, actually a month ahead of schedule, which is great. We're happy to do that. And into next year, what next year is all about is studying this plan in the environmental impact report and studying the master reclamation plan and then modifying them as needed through the environmental review process. So there's going to be plenty of input for you folks over the next year. And then from there on out, start hiring folks to design and build the facility. We look at construction as beginning in 2019 and then having it operational in 2021. So we're on schedule to do that. So just want to leave you with a few thoughts. What we do know now that we didn't know before 3 years ago, and this is the starting point for the entire facility master planning process. We know we can build a water reclamation facility at South Bay Boulevard that meets the community goals. The question is how and what do we do and what are the costs involved? We do know that a total reclamation project is possible by 2021, and that means not just reclamation ready, but actual reclamation online. It's possible to do, and that's a key consideration on the costing side of things as well, both in terms of upfront costs, but lots of cost savings down the road. Mike will get into that a little bit. Groundwater injection as a potential reclamation opportunity, and then extraction later, indirect potable reuse, does appear feasible. And that's exciting for us because that's one of the key considerations. We're looking at other options there as well, but that's going to be an important consideration to make this implementable. Ultimately, we see this project as a way for the city to gain water independence. The idea right now, the city is primarily on state water, which is becoming increasingly not as reliable. So the degree to which this project could offset the need or even eliminate the need for state water down the line, that's an exciting prospect. It figures into cost savings as well. And that's why we're talking tonight in terms of many things. We're looking at, is it possible to even compress what we've been calling phase 1 and 2, getting it reclamation ready and then getting the reclamation online? Does it make sense to compress those to the extent possible to save costs, both in terms of the short term and in the long term, and potentially getting off state water? What does this mean to you? This is an important slide. We'll come back to this in some depth. Costs here overall, we're looking at higher costs than we had reported before. These aren't real surprises to us, though, given the high level of treatment that we need to do and some of the other considerations, that the costs in phase 1 to get to recycled water ready, anywhere from $114 to $136 million, depending on various factors, including contingencies and such, and to get it to full reclamation, to be able to use the water between $125 and $168 million. Now, those numbers seem very high, I think, based on what you'd seen before, and we can explain how that would work. The bottom table here is important, though, how it might affect rates. And this we're still working on right now. What you're seeing on the left is what the current combined water and sewer rate is for people in Morro Bay who use 5 units of water, $114 a month. The approved rate increase, which was intended to address the phase 1 aspect of the project And the city's share, it was originally passed with the idea that Cayucas and Morro Bay would be together, but ultimately it's the first part of implementing the project, would raise the combined sewer and water rates to $150 a month. And ultimately, when we're done building this thing, when we have recycled water, we're looking at an additional on top of that, anywhere from another $27 to $74 per month, depending on a lot of issues that we're still working through on reclamation out. So that gives you an order of magnitude of where we're at. We just want to come up front with that information and then explain that as we go into that. So right now, I want to turn it over to the technical folks. First to Matt Thomas from Black & Veatch, who's the primary author on the facility master plan, to explain not only just some of the technology issues involved, but the siting issues and some of the considerations on why we're putting things where we are. And then Mike Nunley will follow up primarily on cost issues. So I'll hand it over to Matt.
Okay. Make sure I know how to work this. Yes? Okay. Well, thanks, John. As John said, I'm going to walk through the basics of the Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan that was published last week. Try to hit some of the high points of it. We brought with us today a couple of my colleagues that are part of the project team. If there are any questions at the end of the presentations, we have some other folks available to answer some of the details that they were involved in. So let's just start off with, where is this site? And I think it's a little, let me make sure, yep. It's a little hard to see here, but here's the city of Morro Bay, the main downtown area. Highway 1 is there. This is South Bay Boulevard, so you'll hear the site referred to as the South Bay Boulevard site. And the specific site is this parcel right here. So this is the care center and the intersection with South Bay Boulevard and Highway 1. So this is the site that we're talking about for the new water reclamation facility site. The major overarching goal for the water reclamation facility is to provide the city a new water resource and the ability to make the highest and best use of that resource. You can see up here a series of different potential uses for the water, with the most valuable being groundwater injection, basically supplementing the city water supply. The key here is that the new reclamation facility, as it's presented, can achieve all of these goals. It has the flexibility to produce any of these kinds of water. And the Master Water Reclamation Plan, which was discussed earlier, is being prepared as we speak. It's actually going to define the actual uses that will be used with the water from the plant. But at this point, we have a wide variety of uses that can be achieved. Oh, sorry. Quick overview. To develop the treatment processes that are included in the project, we developed, along with the city staff and the program staff, a number of evaluation criteria against which we evaluated all the various technologies. This is that list. I won't go through all the details of those, except to say that the main part of that was that they are aligned with the community goals that were set out for the project, all of those goals that John referenced earlier. And that's what the purpose of these criteria was. It's also important to note that we evaluated a wide variety of technologies to use at the plant to determine what would be the most appropriate and would be the most cost-effective to deliver the highest and best uses for the water. So there's a long, long list there, and the intent of that list was to be inclusive. And what that did for us is we made sure that the project would achieve the highest and best use of the water, this new water resource the city will have. Make sure those technologies are proven, they've tried and true in the industry, that they'd be cost effective, that they would achieve regulatory compliance. We need to make sure that the plant meets regulations, and that those technologies would be appropriate to plants of this size and scale. So out of that evaluation process, which was done through a combination of qualitative and quantitative means, working with city staff, we arrived at 2 process treatment trains. There's lots of technical detail that goes into this, but we arrived at 2 alternatives to make that allow for the highest and best end uses. These are one that we called the conventional train. This is a sequencing batch reactor, and as I said earlier, I won't bore you with all the technical details about how that works and what that's about. But again, it's a proven technology for delivering water, treating wastewater and delivering the kinds of water that we want to have here for highest and best use. And then the second treatment train is called a combined secondary tertiary train using technology called membrane bioreactor. So those two trains together are going to provide the city flexibility during the design phase and the implementation phase to come up with the most cost-effective scheme and system to deliver the product water. And to continue that point, the highest and best uses that are being envisioned for the water are groundwater injection, basically supplementing the city water supply with indirect reuse, or to provide irrigation for agricultural purposes. And to be able to do that, in addition to those two treatment processes I just highlighted, we also need to use advanced treatment. It's required to be able to deliver water of that quality. And so you will have seen in the process selection an advanced treatment system. It uses microfiltration and reverse osmosis. Those are proven technologies to deliver recycled water for reuse purposes. A big example in Southern California is the groundwater replenishment system in Orange County. Though that system uses these exact same technologies. They've been doing that for a number of years now to basically supplement the potable water supply there. So that was the plant, and I showed you earlier on a map where the plant is. We also need, obviously, to get the city's wastewater to that plant to be able to treat it. All of the city's wastewater currently comes to the existing wastewater treatment plant that is over on Atascadero Road, located right here. So what is needed is a pump station and pipelines to be able to convey the wastewater to the new plant. We looked at a number of alternatives for ways to do that. This diagram is depicting the pipeline alignment, which is largely in Quintana Road. It was selected for being less costly to construct, less environmental impacts. It's actually more energy efficient, so it was seen as the most favorable alignment for the pipelines. You'll also see up here the pump station, close proximity to the existing wastewater plant. So in that regard, we looked at a whole series of various alternative sites, all in close proximity to the existing plant. The reason for that, again, is because all of the city's wastewater comes there now. It's a natural place to intercept that flow and collect it and put it into a pump station. We looked at other alternatives. All of those other systems and types of facilities would be less efficient and more costly to construct. A keynote here, as you know, is that this area is in a floodplain. And the floodplain issues need to be mitigated to make sure this pump station will remain operational if there were a flood in this area. So the design sets out to do that. And the California Coastal Commission has been consulted with on this. They understand the premise for having the pump station in this location. And they've indicated that they're supportive of having it in that location. So that's a good sign for the project. Those last couple of points I went through, we looked at the liquid treatment, treating the wastewater, how to convey the wastewater. The last piece is how to handle solids. So a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process is that there are solids that we have to deal with. And in that regard, the city currently has their solids hauled away to a regional composting facility in Kern County called Liberty Composting. So as part of this process and this project, we looked at the opportunities that might be associated with doing something different. Those main opportunities being, one, whether or not it would be feasible and cost-effective to create marketable products such as fertilizers by composting materials at the site and doing other processing, and to use the biosolids to generate energy. And both of those alternatives were looked at as a means to potentially save costs and reduce the city's cost for the project. At the end of the day, though, it was found that the current practice of sending it to Liberty Composting is the most cost-effective. Processing on site, or building facilities to generate energy just weren't cost effective. They're more expensive to build and maintain and operate than to do what we're doing now. So the good news is Liberty Composting, they compost the material, they turn it into fertilizers, so those biosolids that we're creating are going to be used for beneficial reuses. It just won't be produced here in our plant. The last part, a central part of the facility master plan is to lay out a site plan, which becomes central to developing a cost estimate for the facility and to determine what it might look like. These are not set in stone. There's going to be a design process to determine what the plant will look like and how it'll be laid out, but these are some ideas and concepts to give everybody an idea and also to support cost estimating. So Bruce Fraser with Fraser Seipel Architects was our architect, and we looked at various alternatives and decided, the best architectural concept for this site is to mimic what is out in the community in that area, which is farm and dairy style buildings, to adopt a color palette similar to buildings that are along Highway 1 between the men's colony and here in the city. And then we also envision using landscape screening to screen the entrance and the frontage of the plant. So I'm going to go through a series of graphics to show you some visualizations of what the plant might look like. Here's a top-down view. So again, here's the site, zooming in a little closer than we looked at before. The Highway 1, South Bay Boulevard, the Bayside Care Center. So here's the plant itself. The process facilities, so the treatment process and the solids process areas are both up here. And then this area closer to the road is for offices and various operations and maintenance facilities, and I'll show you that in more detail here in the coming slides. So here we are looking top down, straight down on top of the plant. These are the treatment process facilities. This is the administration and operations building and the maintenance buildings associated with the wastewater reclamation facility and also the city's Public Works Department water and wastewater maintenance crews. So those would all be located here. The entrance to the plant is over here. This is the main treatment process. I mentioned sequencing batch reactor and membrane bioreactor. Those would all both be situated up here. There would also be a large flow equalization tank. That's to manage flows for these processes. And then this area down here is the advanced treatment components. So I mentioned earlier the advanced treatment systems for beneficial reuses. That's where those would go, down in here. That last figure was what it would look like after completion of just the water reclamation facility. One of the goals, the community goals for the project, was to look at different ways to potentially put other city uses at the site. So what just popped into the screen are a number of other facilities. These are consolidating all of the city's public works maintenance facilities at this site. So those would be located here, and those have to do with street maintenance, the trolley, and other uses that would be taken out to this area. Okay. Here's a quick view looking back toward the ocean, basically looking south. So again, here's those treatment facilities over here, the advanced treatment facilities, and the first part, the maintenance and operations buildings for the plant. And then here's that same view with the additional combined maintenance facilities there on the site. This is a view looking more towards southeast to give you a closer in view on the treatment facilities. And the things I wanted to point out actually are in this area. I mentioned the equalization tank for flow management. That's right in here, as well as the sequencing batch reactor or membrane bioreactor and other facilities. And what I wanted to point out is how these are all covered. There's also a facility up here called the Headworks, which is the first treatment step for the project. All of these facilities right now are envisioned as being fully covered and fully enclosed for odor control. And the FMP defines a very robust odor control system to make sure that the facility is compatible with neighboring uses and friendly to the neighbors. Okay. And then this is just for orientation. This is looking back toward Highway 1 and the bridge under to South Bay Boulevard. And then I'll just step you through really quickly. These are some views looking from the highway. This is what most people will actually see of the plant. And it's very well hidden. This is from Highway 1 looking, heading west, so we're heading toward the city. And this is east of South Bay Boulevard. This is the first viewpoint where you would see the plant tucked up back in there. You see it through some trees. The next viewpoint is a little farther to the west, so it's just east of South Bay Boulevard. Still can see it back there. It's very small, though. Oops, went backwards, sorry. Here's some trees. So this is, we've gone a little farther west, so it's screened from all the trees that are close to the highway. And then finally, the farthest west view that we'll look at tonight, you can see it's starting to recede into the background and now it's hidden behind the care center. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'm going to hand it off to Mike. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. So I want to walk through several slides to talk about cost, because this has been one of the, we recognize, is one of the most critical issues with the project. And so why is this so much higher than those 2013 costs that we keep going back to from the siting studies? We want to talk a little bit about the origin of those and where we're at now with the facility master plan versus that work. So originally the $100 million estimate that has been kind of thrown around and presented at past meetings, that was a mid-range really for comparison of sites only. What we attempted to do was put a framework together in the 2013 and 2014 siting studies that would allow the city to compare the relative costs of different sites. Is this site $10 million more than that site? Is this one $20 million more than that site? South Bay Boulevard, we knew at the time, one of the things we had communicated to the community was we expected that it could possibly be 10 or 15% higher to be at South Bay Boulevard than the Morrow Valley sites because the pipelines are a little longer. Our assessment was, in terms of overall risk of the project and the need to move forward, the fact that we have, while we do have some neighbors to that South Bay Boulevard site, we have less residents nearby, that we felt like that was the ability to move forward quickly was a significant advantage at that location. 3 years of cost escalation since 2013 is 8 to 9% total, somewhere in that neighborhood. The highest and best water recycling opportunities that we found through some ongoing work required higher end treatment processes than we had analyzed a mid-range of treatment processes in those old reports that included everything from pond systems on the low end to the treatment processes that we've selected in the master plan at the high end. And then ancillary facilities and work that wasn't known or included at the time included the cost for the plant decommissioning, the recycled water delivery system we noted in those reports we had not been included at that time. So we fully expected that those costs would be added and more detail would be added through this planning process. So the May 2016 site analysis we did was really the most recent opportunity we had to present costs to the public, specifically for the purpose, again, of comparing sites. And it's when we looked at the Morrow Valley, Highway 41 sites, South Bay Boulevard, and Toro Creek. And the goal was comparison of sites. So we had partial water reclamation facility costs at the South Bay Boulevard site. And the midpoint of that cost range, based again on the old 2014 assumptions, was $107 million. So, plus or minus around 23 to 25% is what we stated in that report. The range was 84 to 132 million. Huge range. The goal of this was just to compare relative costs for different sites. The No regional recycled water system had been included at that time in that effort, and we noted that in those reports. And the decommissioning of the existing site had not been specifically called out in those reports because it would be the same at any site we went to, as long as we were leaving the existing plant site. So some new information from the facility master plan and other ongoing studies related to hydrogeology, various work efforts, were that the South Bay Boulevard site was preferred and had less delays. And our sense is that means real costs, reduction in cost escalation to the project. A standalone equalization storage was really needed for the advanced treatment, and that was sized and costed out through the last few months of this facility master planning process. The wastewater plant decommissioning costs are higher than previous estimates that have been put together in prior master plans for the old project at the old site. The sequencing batch reactor, membrane filtration, and UV disinfection are higher-end treatment processes, but are really essential to meeting all of the community goals for high-end use of water. Groundwater aquifer storage is available in the Morrow Valley for highly treated plant effluent, and we have the possibility to offset state water deliveries with groundwater injection. And so that kind of complicates the math when we look at rate impacts, but in a positive way. So with these new opportunities, water independence could be possible, meaning that the city could have a sustainable water supply with the combination of existing groundwater rights, with emergency use of the seawater desal plant, and then with groundwater injection from this water reuse facility. All the water demand through the city's foreseeable planning window it could be met through reusing groundwater supplies, with seawater desal as a possible backup if there was an issue with these other water supplies. Current and future costs of state waters could possibly be eliminated through this. And then initial wastewater costs will be higher, but could be less vulnerable to cost escalation in the future because the city would control this water supply. And the water reclamation facility would be well positioned to meet all the project goals. So, we would produce water that's appropriate for highest and best use, possible, in terms of lower water rates compared to many of your neighbors in the future is one way to look at that. And then reclaimed water, best available treatment for contaminants of emerging concern. It was addressed as one of the early project goals. And then phase 1 and phase 2 could possibly be built within the 5-year window that we'd originally mapped out for just phase 1. So the water reclamation facility cost to customers consists of a lot of different costs. First, there are the hard costs, construction, demolition. That's a lot of what's been addressed in the facility master plan. There are operation and maintenance costs for power, staffing, and chemicals. That also has been included in the master plan. And then there are also the soft costs for the administration of the project. And then in design efforts and planning and permitting and EIRs and all the other work that goes on the side. So how do we predict what customer rate impacts really are with all these different factors? Well, some of the key questions are, what are the total project costs? So the hard costs, the soft costs, the operation and maintenance, those ongoing costs, what are they? Can the water reclamation facility project reduce other customer utility costs? So could we buy less imported water, and what could that possibly save? What will be the financing costs? So what are the interest rates and terms? Just like with your mortgage at home, and for those of you that are, I see some members of the Citizens Finance Committee who are intimately involved with this, you know that makes a real difference. What grants can we pursue? That's been a critical part of our focus in our project since we started. And then could the project design include solar power or other alternative energy opportunities to reduce ongoing costs? Could that help us overall? So another item that we want to talk about is project contingency, and this is something we spent a lot of time discussing in some of the prior siting studies when we presented cost opinions. And contingency is really not it's not a soft cost. in that you're not definitely going to have to dip into a contingency, but you have it there for what you don't know yet, because you really haven't gotten into the detailed design of the project, is to provide, for budgeting purposes, a conservative factor to allow you to be prepared for things that might come up that you hadn't anticipated, whether they're permitting challenges, whether they're mitigation and monitoring requirements that come from a regulatory agency, or whether it's some physical challenge that comes up on the project. And you typically reduce those as the project moves forward. So that's another line item you see in our costs and in the facility master plan. So the water reclamation facility project components, I want to take everybody back to when we talk about phase 1 and phase 2, what these really mean. The phase 1 water reclamation facility and the phase 2 on-site facilities are what Black & Veatch has analyzed in their facility master plan. And so that includes the phase 1 water reclamation facility was a lift station and pipelines, and the water reclamation facility for tertiary disinfected wastewater. The phase 2 on-sites included advanced treatment, so microfiltration, reverse osmosis, ultraviolet disinfection, and advanced oxidation processes to get the water to a point where it's fully capable of what we call indirect potable reuse, meaning treated to a very high level so it can be injected into the ground. It can be stored, go through some additional soil aquifer treatment, and then be extracted out for potable water. And then a recycled water pump station and some storage. The phase 2 offsite is really what we talk about for the delivery of that water. So it includes the groundwater injection system and the pipelines to those injection wells. It can include the pipelines for agricultural exchange, primarily looking in Morrow Valley, and then also it can include pipelines for urban irrigation. So city parks or golf course, while we don't consider those necessarily urban, could be opportunities for reuse of that water. So the phase 1 water reclamation facility capital cost opinion, you have the phase 1 water reclamation facility construction cost subtotal from facility master plan. Without a contingency is $97 million. This is from the Black & Veatch report. So procurement, including preparation of the bid documents for getting contractors on board, that's about 4% at this level. That's what we estimate for budget. Project administration and construction management, all the way through that process of managing construction and having observers there to make sure the contractors are sticking to the plans and specifications, another right around 12%. Permitting, monitoring, and mitigation, we have an allowance of 1%. Existing plant demolition, so assuming we pay roughly 2/3 of that demolition cost shared with our partners at Cayucas, winds up being in the neighborhood of a little over $3 million. Property acquisition at about $300,000. That's what we've roughly estimated now for South Bay Boulevard. And then that gets us to a phase 1 capital cost of $114 million. And we have a contingency in there of 25% of the construction subtotal, and you'll see the math on that in the facility master plan. And that contingency, again, it's not a slush fund. It's not, it's there for conservative budgeting, and it's somewhere that we can pull funds from if we reach challenges that weren't anticipated. So what we've done is we're at a preliminary process in our master reclamation plan, and you've heard us talk about this for the last few months. Once we had direction from council on a site preference at South Bay Boulevard for planning and permitting, we could move forward with the facility master plan, and we could also move forward with the master reclamation plan. And that's the plan that you all may recall has been 50% funded by a grant from State Water Resource Control Board. So they funded $75,000 of that plan. And so we've been working on some pretty significant groundwater modeling and also some significant analysis to look at costs for different recycled water opportunities. And so the range we have is fairly wide right now, but our goal, we come back to the community in the March timeframe with the different reuse alternatives, costs, pros and cons, to talk about what we call these phase 2 offsites largely. And so the phase 2 recycled water facilities are in the neighborhood of 11 to 26 million is what the range we're estimating right now. Wide range because of where we're at in this process. Varies a lot depending on what we do with that water. But that gets us to a total water reclamation facility capital cost of $126 to $140 million. If we have a construction contingency we put on that as a conservative budgeting tool, that gets us to a capital cost that's in the range of $150 to $168 million, and that's for full reuse of that water. So that's an estimate of the full program cost. So another factor, and I want to walk through these. We're throwing a lot of numbers out, but the purpose here is to show you what goes into rate impacts. That's really where we're going with this. Another aspect of this are the operation and maintenance costs. So phase one of the water reclamation facility, so that the systems Matt described earlier, around $1.5 million. The phase two recycled water facilities, depending on what we do with that water, is $500,000 to a little less than $1 million. So the total water reclamation facility operation and maintenance costs are in the neighborhood of $1.8 to $2.5 million, somewhere in that range. Water supply costs. So we talked about how that's important to understand, because if we're going to use this project as a way to make the community, give the community a sustainable water supply, it's important to understand what the savings might be on the water supply side. So indirect potable reuse could possibly offset state water costs. So when we talk about different water supplies, it's not too critical that you remember exactly to the dollar how many thousands of dollars per acre foot this supply is or that supply. But what I want to talk about, so state water project costs, community paid about $2,000 per acre foot. That's a metric we use in the water supply industry to look at cost for delivered water. And estimate is that could go up 10% to 20% in the future as a result of the state's need to upgrade the state water project and the need to pass that cost on to customers. Morrow Valley groundwater costs to extract and treat that water at the city's existing water treatment plant, which has a treatment system to remove nitrates from the water, is around $1,000 per acre foot. The city has a 580 acre foot per year allocation. They really don't dip into that very often except when state water's down, because you have to pay for state water whether you take it or not. Seawater desalination costs. So the city has brought the seawater desalination plant, part of the water plant, online before. It costs around $1,600 an acre foot to treat that water. So more expensive than the local groundwater, a little less expensive than the state water. So the annual cost of state water was right around $2.5 million last year. And at estimated future rates, we anticipate it's going to be, could be 10% higher. So that could get us to $2.6 million a year. So how much could we reduce costs? I've shown you a wide range of capital costs. Capital costs, O&M costs, and these water savings all factor together in order to form the basis of your water and sewer rates. So what could happen? First off, the financing assumptions in the rate study are conservative, which is good. The assumption was you'd have 2.5% state revolving fund financing. Historically, the last couple of years, it's been in the neighborhood of 1.5%. So if your financing is a little better than 2.5%, if it's 2% a year, that could save $1.6 million a year in your annual costs for the project. The savings, if you do not pay for state water because you've either gotten into a long-term lease with somebody to use that water for you and reimburse you for it, or if you hit the end of your debt service, which is 6 or 7 years, and you elect not to use that water, the savings could be as high as $1.5 million a year. And in grant funding, a conservative, I think, success goal for grants is 10%. Our target would be to shoot higher than that, but assuming that we're at the 10% range of that, then another factor is what we call a solar power purchase agreement, and that's where you contract with somebody to come in and build solar panels for you, either as part of the water reclamation facility plant construction or outside of that, and they come in and they'll often charge you, 5 or 6 cents less a kilowatt hour than what you're paying full freight for power at your site. And so that could save up to a third of your power costs. So if we look at these fairly conservative targets for cost savings, then what that can do for us is, we went through earlier, John gave a brief summary, your current water and sewer rates, and since we're talking water supply and wastewater kind of combined, it's important to understand them together. This is around $115 a month for this fiscal year. That's the average sewer rate for single-family residential, and the water rate's based on 5 units a month. So the approved rate for fiscal year 1920, so out at the end of your current rate increase, is around $150. So with the total water reclamation facility project, on the low end, based on what we're seeing with some of your reuse opportunities, it could be in the neighborhood of $27. It could be as high as $74. If you look at the higher cost reuse opportunities, things like a lot of pipeline extending out to different possible agricultural users, that really is on the high end for us. But it's quite a range there, depending on how successful we can be with some of these with some of these approaches. And the goal, and this again is kind of an all-in analysis. So this is with with what we understand right now for the full water reuse opportunities and the range of those. So next steps really is we want to receive public input on the draft facility master plan. I mean, we understand these are large numbers, large costs, and it's a big community issue and a big community concern. And we want feedback on what you're seeing. We know folks haven't had a chance to review this in detail, but really what we wanted to do tonight is give an overview, talk about costs and the big issues people care about, get input from the public, and then we also want to encourage you to come to the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting on December 6th. We're going to have a similar presentation for them and elicit feedback from the Citizens Advisory Committee. We also are going to go to a City Council meeting December 13th to present a lot of the same information. And so we really want input from the public. It's important to us to know what you care about, what's important, because as you can see, what we've attempted to do is take your goals and take the feedback we've gotten at past workshops and put a project together. And you may come back and you may say, well, that goal is not as big of a deal for us as cost or some other goals. We need to know that. That's important for us. And really, we take direction from council. It's important for council to hear. It's important for Citizens Advisory Committee to provide guidance to council. And we're kind of we're kind of your instruments and your engineers for telling you what the cost implications are of those decisions. So the draft master reclamation plan will be out in March 2017. The rate study, we would look at coming back with a rate study in fall 2017. Rates would not go up fall 2017, but the goal would be come back with a rate study after we get through the master reclamation plan and can look at, give a more detailed look at the rate impacts. Draft EIR in August 2017 and a final EIR November 2017. So at this point, we'll open for questions and answer.
And I would like to just, as a point of logistics here, and we've got about an hour left here, what we would like you to do so people can hear you on TV is if you've got something to say, we do have a microphone and podium. We'd ask that you go up there and do it. And before anyone goes up there, can I have a show of hands? How many people actually want to say something? I'm trying to figure out the timing of how much time we want to allow people to say things. We have a couple people, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we have some time on this. So I would just say, make your points, take the time you need, but we may need to manage the time as we move along here. So we'll be writing down and taking notes from what you're saying. And if you don't want to talk here today, that's fine too. We do have cards in the back. You saw them when you came in. You can take those with you. If you have any questions, you want to scribble them down, even if you say something here today, get that information to us. Either drop those off at the city or email us your information and your concerns. And we want to combine all that and present them to the Citizen Advisory Committee so that they have the technical, both the technical and the community feedback that they need in order to make recommendations for us on how we might modify that plan before moving forward. So with that,
John, if I could just make
Sure.
one, so looking forward to engaging with questions. So this is not, as you see, a formal public meeting of the city. So there's not a Brown Act rule requirement in force right now, which also means that we can have interaction with folks who have questions. So there's not a 3-minute time limit for you to make a 3-minute statement. You can ask a question and we'll respond to it, and ask another question and we'll try to respond to that one, and be considerate of others' times. But we're very happy to have interaction here. So it's really a two-for. One is a Q&A, a back and forth of questions to help educate all of us. And then the second is to, as John said, for us to take great notes, because the key part of this is getting public feedback on each aspect of the plan: the engineering, the technology, the design, the odor control, the cost, all of those things. So with that, I'll turn it back to John.
Okay, so maybe the way to do this here is raise your hand, and I'll just point and call, and then we'll come one at a time and take some time. Go ahead, come on up to the front.
Hello, my name is Jenny B. Jones, and I'd like to comment that the goal of self-sufficiency is very exciting to me personally. In the design aspect, I noticed the buildings looked somewhat like Cuesta College, and that would be nice if we could keep a consistency there. I have 3 questions. What is the likelihood of Coastal Commission approval of this plan? Do you want all 3 fired, or do you want to answer to that?
Let's just have a back and forth. So ask a question, and we'll try to answer
Yeah.
that one and go from there.
Well, first of all, I'll start on that. That's a great question about Coastal Commission. All along the way, we've been engaging Coastal Commission staff. It's critical. We need their support in this. So they're aware of what we're doing. We floated concepts on this site to them and got their staff level feedback, which was all very positive. What they told us was they're supportive of the site. They told us that, we asked them direct questions, whether it was about creek setbacks or agricultural impacts or visual impacts, coastal issues, things that they're concerned about in the coastal policies. Their basic feedback on the visual issue, for example, was they want it to blend in with just what we're trying to do, the type of architecture. They'd like to see things screened with landscaping to the extent possible. They're excited. They're glad that it's set so far back from Highway 1, which we all recognize as a scenic highway. So that they know that. But they gave us a pretty good read. If you do those things, we're pretty good there. We have an ongoing dialogue about how to deal with creek function, making sure that whatever setbacks we have, whatever possibility of impact there, as we address that, and I think they feel pretty good about that. The agricultural issues, they were less concerned. We don't have irrigated agriculture going on out there, but they're concerned in a general sense. Where their biggest concerns, frankly, were how to address the lift station question, which Matt discussed before. The collection system necessarily makes a lot of sense to collect to an area at the lowest part of the city, which tends to be in the floodplain, which is near the existing wastewater plant. They're aware of that. They get that. They just want to make sure that the design allows for floodproofing there, and that we consider other alternatives before dismissing them, and to provide a justification why we would need to go there. But the overall sense was pretty good from Coastal Commission so
Pretty
far.
confident. Okay.
If I can just comment 2 or 3 points on it. So from the big picture, Coastal is extremely supportive of the idea of strategic retreat, moving the facility off the beach inland. 2, they have not expressed any concerns about the South Bay Boulevard site. They generally like it. This is Coastal staff. And 3rd, they recognize, and we've had some discussion with them, that there are going to have to be some facilities down in the floodplain area, because that's where all of our sewers drain to. and so they need us to explain that to them, and to demonstrate that that's where all of the sewers drain right now, is down essentially to the current facility. And so there's going to have to be some lift station there to move that sewage 2 miles inland. But they understand that, and and we're working with them to mitigate those things.
Okay, that I guess would segue into my second question, which would be any plan that you have for heavy rain and flooding. Will there be roofs over I saw on the design, I saw open treatment.
So I'll take, go ahead. Well, I'll take part of that. So the team talked about a large equalization tank.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the key components that had to be included because of the increased flows that come during the rainy season.
Right.
And so the increased flows from the rainy season have been planned in. We do plan to have the facility completely covered. That's the design that you saw, and that's the cost that's been built in. I think those are probably
That would answer my question
great.
right there. Yeah, great. And then my last question is it at all possible if when the pipeline goes in on Quintana, that some power lines and other things could be gone underground? I'd love to see this town start to go underground with some of the cables and telephone wires and power lines. Any thoughts on that?
I'll jump into that. That's not included in the current estimates, but that would be that'd be a question for the Public Works Director and something the city would consider. You know, often when you do pipeline projects is you consider those other, if there was work you were going to do anyway, like repaving or any type of improvements, you try to put all those projects together. So it's definitely something that I'm sure would be considered at the time.
It's a great idea and exactly the kind of notes that we want to be taking through this
Okay,
process.
so me just saying that will trigger some talking over there, or do I need to do something else to?
It triggered it.
Awesome.
We're there.
Great. All right, my concluding comment is, in my opinion, $27 to $55 a month in a hike, and we get a new plant and water independence, and we have to do something. Seems like a great deal to me. That's just my 2 cents. Thanks. Who's next?
Art Beckman. My first question is, I thought I heard that phases 1 and 2 are now together. Is that by 2021 operational date?
We're confident we can do those by 2021, by June of 2021. And part of what we'll do is put the details into that master reclamation plan. But yeah, we feel at this point that we can compress that and get that done in 5 years.
Absolutely fantastic. That's
And
the best
we're
news I heard tonight.
Great, and we're better than cautiously optimistic, but the reason that we can't be definitive is this was the facility master plan. Still to be completed is the master reclamation plan, but we've got all of the initial and actually the mid-range hydrology reports, which indicate that we have a Morro Basin that will accept all of our effluent, or all of our clean effluent into an aquifer. And since we know that now, then we can start planning now that through this process, should the council give us that direction, then we can start planning now to do the 5-year phase 1 and the 2-year phase 2 concurrently instead of sequentially.
That's fantastic. That's the first I've heard about that. The second item is more kind of a geeky technical thing, since my background was in cost schedule engineering. It has to do with the definition of contingency. I think the Black and Veatch gentleman can concur with what I'm going to say. Basically, when you add contingency, and it was 30%, which is a good number for a preliminary estimate, it's down to 25%, which seems probably appropriate because there's certainly more known. But for everybody out there, contingency is to get the estimate at a 50-50 probability of where it's going to be. Then the bell curve is going to go around the number with the contingency. So to think that the contingency may go down, that's not what's going to happen. It means you're at a 50-50 point, equal probability. It could be more than what you've got with the contingency. equal probability it could be less than what's there. So contingency is a very difficult concept for a lot of people to understand. They think it's kind of a slush money, but it's basically you add some level of contingency as a definition of the project goes along. So to think, obviously we're not going to spend the money if we don't need it, but the contingency gets you to a 50% probability point for the numbers they're talking about. Mr. Blackevich, did I properly explain contingency?
Yeah, sure.
Well, it's a little bit different than what was stated.
I can say that we had our construction cost estimators do a very detailed analysis. They do hard bid construction work as well as estimating for engineering work. So they came in with their best estimate of what it would cost to build the facility, and are conservative in doing that as well. And then we have contingency on top of that so that we provide a range, and we believe that the cost of the project will fall within the range of the cost estimate we were provided or the contingency at the
That's
height.
not exactly what I said. I can come and explain it later, but the contingency gets added to get a point, and the range then goes around that number. So,
Okay, right up front here.
Good evening. My name is Terry Simons, and unfortunately I don't have my questions very organized because they kind of came in the process. But first of all, just as a general comment, I'd really like to compliment the consultants and staff to the lesser degree. Well, you didn't know what effluent versus tertiary water going into Churro Valley is. But anyway, I think you hear us. I think you're hearing us. I like the focus of the presentation, bottom lining out, and what does it really mean in rate costs. I think most of the people in the city don't understand or really want to understand or learn about water treatment and water reclamation. I think what they understand is what their water bill and their sewer bill is every month, and if you can give them confidence to believe that this is an affordable project, the details is really up to you guys. As to you hearing us, my first interaction with this group of consultants was several months ago, and I expressed quite a bit of concern about the lift station, and I was quite thrilled to see that there's been some study on the lift station. I just got a copy of the report offline yesterday, which I started reading. It's 300 and something pages, guys, and you're having a first showing of it 2 days after you have it out. I will generate a lot more questions, but I would like to say thank you for focusing some effort on the lift station. But since that's been my first real question that I had way back when, I wanted to follow that up with a couple of things. I noticed that the current plan for the lift station calls for a 1,000 kilowatt generator. That's a 2,000 horsepower Caterpillar engine. My first concern would be that redundancy for critical systems is really important, and I think that while they may not be quite as efficient, I think at a minimum you should have a pair of generators rather than be totally dependent on one generator, because when that generator is needed, it will be needed, and you won't have time to get the local Caterpillar mechanic to come down and work on it. So I would really encourage you to have some redundancy there. I've done projects similar to this in the past, and when we had pumping stations, we tried to, I'm sure this is a multi-pump lift station. It's not a single pump, because the economies of it, in order to hit your peak flow versus your average flow versus your low flow, you're going to want to run staged pumps. I would encourage you to think about backing your pumps with staged generation capacity on a rotating basis so that cumulatively over the first 5 years you have balanced the number of hours on your generation capacity with the number of hours on your pumps. We normally do balanced pump systems so that one pump doesn't kick in all the time and wears out while the other 3 pumps are sitting there doing nothing. Where are the 2 existing lift stations in Morro Bay? Your report describes there being 2 other lift stations in Morro Bay. It's almost a philosophical question because it gets to my point. If you look at the hydrology of Morro Bay, you'll see that from Main Street up, a large percentage of the developed portion of Morro Bay is hydrologically above the proposed wharf. And yet, your current lift station plan calls for taking the sewage all the way down to the bottom of the hill and then pushing it all the way back up. Now, in the plan, it speaks to the fact that to do something otherwise would require additional lift stations. Well, I would submit that as a practical matter, inside your composite lift station are multiple lift stations. They may be all in one place, but there are multiple lift stations. I would really look hydrologically, topographically at the community and look and see if you couldn't have some cutoff points, say up from Morro Bay Boulevard up, all of that stuff. Once you hit Quintana at the top of Morro Bay Boulevard, you're pretty much downhill to the wharf. So everything coming up that whole hill, you could bypass and just take straight to the planned facility. I don't have the hydrologic studies of the various segments of the community. I don't know whether you do. I think maybe your initial plan was based around just the total daily input at the plant as it exists right now without really looking at where it's coming from around the community. So I think that if you did a cutoff, say at Morro Bay Boulevard at Quintana and everything upslope of that and took it directly to the plant, you may significantly reduce the amount of demand at the lift station at the existing plant, and I would encourage you to do that. I wrote some discourse lately in some of the local network, neighborhood.com network, about the need for a hardened facility at the lift station, because while your current plan calls for it to be 2 foot above the 100-year floodplain, the 100-year floodplain is about 25 feet below the tsunami inundation line. If there's ever going to be a need for a hardened facility in that area, it'll be with a tsunami. And I don't know what the probability of the coastal tsunami inundation is in terms of 100-year or 500-year events. Maybe it's so remote that it's not worth considering. And certainly the 100-year floodplain is a reasonable thing. But I think that facility should be hardened to the max. Consequently, the smaller it can be and the least critical it can be argues for perhaps some separated out some other lift stations, particularly if there's a hydrological benefit to cutting off everything upslope and diverting it directly. Similarly, North Morro Bay has another type of hydrological thing where you might be able to extend a little bit of force main out there and locate a lift station further out of the inundation zone and separate and distinct from the cutoff station that I'm talking about. So there's just a couple of ideas that have been kicking around. The other last point, the future of the outfall line and its transition through this period. It would appear that the master trench for the force main also seems, in addition to the 16-inch force main, which I think is, if we go with my strategy of dividing it, could be made much smaller, at least for half of the length, that there's also an outfall return line for untertiarily treated water from the plant. That's an expensive piece of plumbing, particularly when you figure that the reinjection sites are so very close to the plant. That, would, to my mind, speaks even more why you should push ahead as rapidly as possible the water reclamation aspect of this, so that if nothing else, you don't have to build that return line. I don't know what it's sized at, but I'm guessing it's probably 12 inches or so, and that's a long run with a very expensive line, a bigger trench for the whole situation. Maybe we can put the underground utilities that the one woman would like in that same trench instead of having to go back to the outfall line. I'll leave it at that. I will forward a more comprehensive set of questions and comments to you directly, and I'll get them directly to you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maine.
I'm John Mino. I was wondering, could we get the pictures back up of the facilities themselves? Is that possible? Yeah, that would be good. I noticed in Chapter 7 that the existing, which ones are the administration and the maintenance buildings, and
That's these.
these meaning you're circling
Yeah,
both of those buildings?
This is an administration building, or offices.
Okay.
And then these are all various maintenance shops and vehicle storage and material storage buildings.
Okay, so I noticed in the report that the existing, the present Morro Bay facilities for these same purposes were approximately like 5,200 square feet, and these total 10,000 square feet. And I'm just curious to find out how come, and why is that, and what's the cost associated with it?
So the facilities that we show here are the combined water and wastewater operations facility, because it doesn't make sense to separate those folks and have them at different places. Regarding the square footages, that came from meeting with the operators. It came from input from a 2008 needs assessment that the city did, where they identified how much space they really need for these different departmental functions. So that really was the basis of that estimate.
So I noticed in one thing there's like over, I mean, just an example, reading down, like there's over 900 square feet that's just toilet and locker room. How many employees are we having here for this?
15 to 17.
Okay. Clearly, I mean, one of my main concerns is the footprint of this project. And so I don't know if there's any opportunity at all to possibly downsize these facilities, and how closely it's been looked at as far as minimizing, not only would that be a cost savings, but it would certainly be helpful as far as the footprint goes. The other thing that I'm concerned about is if you look at the, I don't know what you call the upper thing on the right here, there's space between, that open space between them. Down below, there's a common paved area. Why is that open space? Why does that need to be there? Why do you need two driveways? Why can't you combine that space? Why does that have to be there?
Yeah,
It's
this
the
has to
grading.
do mostly with topography. This is a slope, as you know. So this area right here is a transition slope from the upper area down to this lower area. And then these facilities need access on both sides for various functions that the operators need to maintain. So we, as a preliminary layout, which is what you see here, we show an access on both sides, or on all sides, I guess I should say, on two sides of each of these buildings to allow for those functions. It's chemical deliveries, it's the ability to bring in or remove equipment. It's those kinds of functions that need those driveways. And then we also needed to have the ability to maneuver vehicles, very large vehicles. So we have, for example, this turnaround seems large, but it's there because a large vehicle would need to be able to come up here and turn around to drive back out. And same thing around these buildings.
So that all the open space we're looking at, then there's no way of consolidating any of that more as far as moving it away from the highway, getting it back consolidated more.
This is just a preliminary layout for the purposes of establishing a first idea of what the plant might look like and how it might be laid out. During detailed design, the designers will work to look at different ways to do it and take in these kinds of inputs to find some opportunities.
Well, from just being a neighbor to this, it would really be my desire, and also as far as aesthetically from Highway 1 and Viewshed, there's no doubt as much of all of that can be consolidated and combined back there would really benefit the Viewshed big time. I believe that there might be ways that it could be consolidated where you wouldn't see it. Now, there is a rub, and I'm sure that the folks that I've talked to as staff are well aware of it, but one of my main issues and my concerns, I certainly don't want this project next to me, but the sewer plant itself isn't a concern as much as these other added things that are going to go all way more into the Viewshed and are totally unnecessary or related to the sewer project. The city has other options for this. The sewer plant, I get it. You're sort of under a mandate. You don't have a mandate to put other municipal uses on this site. And by doing so, you're going to increase the footprint. You're going to absolutely affect the view shed. And if that's important to people, which it seems to me it would be, you should keep all other municipal uses except what's directly related to this out of here, please. And I know I've made this clear to the staff that I've talked to, but I'd like to make it public. I just, like I say, there's no, I get the sewer plant part. The other part is, in as far as the uses, that's what's really going to impact me more than anything. And we're in an agricultural zone. It's coastal ag zone. There's reasons we don't have municipal uses and industrial uses in ag zones. And that's a coastal policy. It should be, I mean, I would hope that they would be concerned about this as well. But I'm certainly concerned about it. I think other agriculturalists might also be concerned about it. Do your sewer plant. Please make it as small a footprint as possible, any way possible. Keep all the other stuff away, please. Thank you.
And good points, and just so you know, and everyone in the public knows too, the environmental impact report will take up on points that you've brought up, whether that's visual impacts or minimizing footprints or grading issues, and we can explore those through the different alternatives we have to look at in the EIR.
Okay.
Right here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Shane Mize Verplank. My sister and I own a ranch off of Highway 1, way up on the hill, way above, sort of off of Quintana Road. And I know I'm sort of going back to the beginning of this project, but I'm kind of wondering why you seemingly gave up on the 41 site rather meekly after a threat of litigation from a few people. Even though 41 site is much, much cheaper, much less dangerous, i.e. South Bay Boulevard, Highway 1, that intersection's already really dangerous because I go on it almost every day, and I know if you're adding all the traffic from the facility going in and out of there, it would turn it into a real death trap to me. And so many more people really are affected than the group that was threatening litigation, unless the hundreds of people in the 2 trailer parks and the nursing home don't count. That's my question. Why was it given up so easily?
I'll jump on that one. Sure. It was a long and robust community conversation that compared 3 or I guess 4 eventually different sites, 3 in the Morro Valley and in this site. And through that process, the community made its interests known, all various parts of the community, and the council eventually in June of this year, June the 9th, I believe, made a determination to express South Bay Boulevard as the preferred site. Important to note that the environmental impact report will has to consider alternatives and options, and so that's why during that process we were stated it was important to keep all options on the table, that
Right.
This is the preferred site, but other options have to remain, and so as we go through the environmental process, all of those options will be taken into account, and the specific concerns and impacts you noted will be taken into account, such as traffic, proximity to neighborhoods. So hope that helps.
Well, that's good, because I think you're going to find when you do the EIR that the traffic alone would make it almost impossible. Thanks.
Thank you.
Richard Sadowski. I got a couple questions. Just scanning through the document, I don't see any measures on how you're handling liquefaction issues with the lift station and the potential points of failure of your force main. Historically, the Coastal Commission, I have experience in this area. It was nice to see Robert Enns out here. He knows that I worked on the lift station out there in Cayucas, and Coastal Commission required a leak detection system under force mains, and I don't see that in your plans. And if it was to be sleeved, is there any plan to do that? And what kind of leak detection system are you going to have? And how are you going to address liquefaction with your lift station? That's one question.
Can we address those? Sure. Who's the right person to do that?
Yeah, well, I'll start. Well, I'll put it this way. This is a master plan level document. So those types of considerations would get handled in the next phase of design typically. So a detailed geotechnical report will be done for the ultimately selected site. I don't think I made very clear in the presentation that a couple of different pump station sites are still in contention to be the ultimately selected site. So once that's settled out, there will be a geotechnical report done. And then the measures for how to handle liquefaction would be incorporated at that point. Typically, that's handled through how you design the structure of the station. As far as leak detection, again, it's a conceptual level design at this point, so we haven't gone to that level of detail yet, but those are the kinds of features that could certainly be included in the design.
Okay, my other question is, or statement really, I've talked to other people that do wastewater treatment plants, and there's evidence to suggest that we could possibly build a package unit right there and eliminate the whole need of putting, let me back up a little bit. I've been following this project for about 12 years. Okay, so when one of the major things was for the Coastal Commission was a manage retreat of critical infrastructure, but we're putting other critical infrastructure, that being a lift station, in the same location or near in flood zones and stuff. Are you looking in your EIR about the potential to be able to build just a wastewater treatment plant, a package unit at a location that, since you're in a flood zone and a liquefaction zone, and tying it in with pilings into bedrock right near, let's say west of Highway 1?
Well, to address the EIR question, thanks for the input there, because what we need to do is look at alternatives that the purpose and seek was to reduce one impact or another. That's identified. And if that concept makes sense to look at in the EIR, we would do it. We do have to kind of work through the alternatives with the EIR consultant as we go forward, but that's one of the options that we can think about doing as far as that analysis goes. We'd also have to look at the technological issues, and I don't want to speak to that, maybe Matt or Mike do, but we've noted that that's something we should be thinking about as we move forward in the process.
Thank you.
Anybody else out there, right in the front?
Good evening, Brad Snook. I'm co-chair of our local county chapter of Surfrider Foundation. A couple questions about hauling out to Kern County. Mentioned biosolids would be hauled. Was the plan to haul something else along with that?
No, what we specifically talked about was Liberty Composting that currently takes the city's biosolids. They have a regional composting operation over in Kern County. And so what they would do is they would come take the biosolids from the city once the city has a full roll-off container, and they would take it to Kern County and process it. They might come get it with other, they have around 40 or 50 customers that they serve, and so there could be a chance they could get it from other agencies over here too. But I couldn't speak to that.
Okay. A couple issues we see in the county is up in Cambria, they're talking about hauling salts to Kern County. What is the plan to do with salts?
So the current concept is the brine that would be discharged from the facility would be discharged through the existing ocean outfall. That's the current plan, and it's similar to how other facilities are operated with brine discharges around the rest of the state. Matt might be able to speak some other projects that he's been involved with, but there's the salinity management pipeline in Ventura County that does that. The nice thing about the brine that comes off these systems is that the brine is a whole lot closer in consistency to seawater than the type of wastewater that's currently going out in terms of the salinity, and so and it's something that will be analyzed in the EIR too.
Okay. From the project area, are there lines that already exist that could be tied into the trunk lines that go down to ocean outfall, existing ocean outfall?
The current strategy would be a new pipeline to go down to the plant site because the pipelines that are currently in the ground they either don't extend all the way out to South Bay Boulevard or they're potable water lines that we don't want to repurpose for this, and so it'd be a new pipeline that would be built down to the existing plant site. Part of the discussion with Cayuga Sanitary District, of course, would be coordination of how that would tie in because they were likely to have similar plans from their water reuse facility. But the goal would be to tie into that existing outfall somewhere upstream of where it goes out to the ocean.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anyone want to get up and say right in the front?
My name is George, and I'm a resident here in Morro Bay. I have some very, very, very simple questions. I'm not an engineer. I'm only a customer. Phase 1 and Phase 2, am I going to get from those two phases drinkable water out of my faucet?
We do not, at this point, intend to pursue what's called direct potable reuse. So we don't intend to have a pipe that comes from this facility straight to the city's water tanks. That might be achievable in some areas of California. In the years ahead, the state is working on regulations to potentially allow that. But based on our size, and actually there's a point I wanted to note for folks, because that's ultimately the very, very highest and best use if you can take that treated water and drink it. That said, I see some folks going, oh man, do we really want to do that? And more importantly, while that is possible for larger cities, larger customers, because of economies of scale, the redundancies required in order to do that for a small community and a small facility such as Morro Bay probably prices us out of that. Couple that with the fact that the hydrology looks very, very good, that we can have what's called indirect potable reuse.
Indirect meaning it's going to the
means it's going to
golf course.
No, sir. It's going to so. Essentially, yes, we're going to drink that water, but we're going to drink it after it's been in the ground for about 6 months. So
Okay.
so it'll come from the plant. It'll go down to the aquifer in the broad vicinity of 41 in Maine, and it'll be injected into the ground in specific locations that will take about 6 months for it to seep through the ground, through the natural purification of the environment, and then we will pull it out of our Morro Valley wells and put it in, and treat it, and then put it into our clean water system. So it will be indirectly, but not directly recycled straight into, and that's why we talked about water independence and a locally controlled water independence, because we won't achieve 100% recycling and never get 100% perfection, but most of what comes out of that treatment facility will go into the ground, and we'll be able to pull it out of our wells to use for our local community.
So then that term tertiary is not drinkable water.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sir.
Okay. Yeah, come on up. Yeah. I don't know that they'll be able to hear you if you're.
Is this treatment plant the water that's going to go back into the aquifer? Is that going to take out all the Viagra and all the prescription drugs? How does it do that?
The question, just so people can hear on TV, will the treated water be treated in such a way to be able to take out prescription medications, drugs, and such as part of the treatment? I'll let Mike answer that.
So I'll tackle that, and I'll ask Sandeep with Black & Veatch to jump in, who's the process engineer that did a lot of the work on facility master plan. But the processes we've identified here, if you go all the way through that, what we call the reverse osmosis and the advanced oxidation on the back end through phase 2, that is the best available treatment for dealing with those types of pharmaceuticals. It is the best success rate for dealing with those. I'll ask Sandeep to jump in.
Excuse me. Yes is the answer. There are multiple treatment barriers from the sewage that comes in all the way to the water that is ultimately injected into the ground. And reverse osmosis, which effectively is a very small filter. Think your Brita filter, but much smaller. It physically stops Viagra, Advil, and so on from going through. And then even more than that, we use chemicals for whatever potentially might go through to break them down into very readily biodegradable compounds, so that when they go in the soil, the bugs in the soil actually either eat them up or transform them into very simple things. So yes is the answer.
This is a great opportunity to make the note. These last two, thanks for these excellent questions, and the dialogue is really good. Thank you. So these last two questions about essentially, are we going to be able to consume this water, and is this will this facility filter out pharmaceutical elements? The answer would be no, if we were back at that mid-range plant that we used as a comparison in 2013 when we were comparing various sites. So it's back to the early part of the presentation in 2013-14 when the city did a comparison of the Morrow Valley to CMC, to the California Men's Colony. You recall that Mike and talked about a mid-range of treatment options, and that's what resulted in the $102 million number. If we were doing that mid-range of treatment options, the answer to the last two questions would have been no, because the mid-range treatment options will not support indirect potable reuse and are not the options that will take out pharmaceuticals and some of those things. So that's, and that was taken from the community's input and the council's approved goals of advanced water treatment for for highest and best use, is how we resulted in a facility that will allow us to do both of those things.
Any other questions? Come on up.
Hi, it's me again, Jenny B. Jones. My understanding about the 41, that whole area, in terms of injecting water, maybe this is all resolved, but in the past, my understanding was that that water table was very polluted with nitrates from upstream farms. Has that been resolved? Will there be increased regulation? Are we talking about something separate? just a concern that came up with that conversation.
I'll take that one. You're exactly right, and some of the numbers that we showed you. So right now, when we pump from the Morrow Valley wells, after we pump from those wells, we have to run that water through our desalination plant to take out enough of the nitrates to fit the requirements for consumption. So when you saw the numbers up there that said $1,000 an acre foot for our Morrow Valley water, that includes that reverse osmosis process to take those nitrates down. So I was going to project on what could be. I'll put it this way: if we did not have to reverse osmosis that water to bring the nitrates down, our cost would be about $150 an acre foot. So
that's kind of my question: is are those nitrate levels exceeding what is expected to happen in that area? Is there some lack of regulation that's going on that's causing such high levels of nitrates happening? What's the deal?
I think Rob.
Hi, Rob.
I'll let Rob answer this one.
I'm back.
So the nitrate contamination that's, hi Jenny,
Hi.
that is in the Morrow Valley is due to years of nitrate pollution, not just one incident that somebody over-fertilized their field once. It's many years, and it'll take many years for that nitrate to flush out. So maybe not in our lifetimes will that nitrate be flushed out of the system. So we'll be treating that water for a long time before we can use it without treatment.
Has that stopped then, though, that pollution that's happened?
I don't think fertilizer application has stopped.
I see.
But I believe that under the ag order, agriculturalists are now applying at more agronomic rates, so the rate that's needed to produce the crop that they are producing rather than over-fertilizing, which is the main cause of the nitrate contamination.
And to the water that we would be injecting, if that is the direction, would have really no detectable levels of nitrate in it. So it'd be much cleaner
after
than
treatment.
what's in there now. After treatment,
Right, but that would
that's
would have been a huge savings, $150 versus $1,000. Anyway, I'll let it go.
You're exactly right.
Let it
And
go.
at the risk of doing science in
It's the
public,
past. It's
and
the
I'm not a
past.
scientist. So if we're injecting nitrate-free water into that aquifer, and there's somewhat nitrate-laden water that's in that aquifer, then there will likely be a dilution that takes place actually in the aquifer. So it could be, and that could reduce the number of years that Rob just talked about until, or maybe not the number of years, but it could improve the nitrate levels in the water we pull out, which could reduce our RO costs a little bit further than 1,000.
Okay, and then just one other, I don't know if it's a question or a thought, that the possibility of selling the existing plant site after demolition could possibly offset some of the cost of this new site. Has anyone talked about that?
We have, absolutely. There's, and perhaps not necessarily selling, but there are now there will be a 26-acre oceanfront site that part of which is owned in part by the Cayucas Sanitary District. I believe it's 11 acres is owned 40% by Cayucas. But at the end of the day, there's a 26-acre oceanfront site that can be put to a higher visitor-serving use. And whether it's sold or whether it's leased by the city, in some way, there will be a great community conversation about what happens to that site. And we have not tried to factor in increased property taxes or any of the things that could come from that. I'm sorry, let me clarify. That land, if sold to somebody, would then generate property tax on that land. Not property taxes for everybody else. But there would certainly the potential of some improved city revenues based on the appropriate community approved and directed redevelopment of 26 acres on the oceanfront.
Right, but there's no direct, you're not factoring that directly into, you know what I'm
We
saying?
have not factored that
As
in
an
yet.
income, on an
Correct.
income line.
We think it's too speculative right now, so we haven't included that in any projection.
Might be nice. Okay, thank you.
It could be, definitely.
Just want to let you know that we have about 10 more minutes, so there's still some time. If anyone has any more questions for us, we'd be happy to answer them. I'm not seeing any hands.
Well, there's what
Yeah.
folks are thinking, so just following from Jenny's, that brief discussion, we've tried to, and will continue to be conservative in our cost projections and our what the future could hold. We don't want to overpromise. We want to promise just about right or underpromise and overdeliver. But so this is really the first time that we have penciled out the likely cost savings in the city's water production based on having a reclamation facility. First time we've done that, and this is the right time to do that because now we have good engineering to back it up. And so while we always hoped that there would be a very positive revenue component to, or cost reduction component to the reclamation, we weren't promising that until we had the engineering to back it up. Similarly, I think there will be a point where when the city starts to consider what could be for those 26 oceanfront acres, then there's a time when we should start doing what some of the revenue calculations are for that possible revitalization, redevelopment, whatever we want to call it. But that time isn't now. So we don't want to overpromise that. We don't want to speculate on what could be. But at the end of the day, that 26 acres is producing almost nothing for the city right now, except for the lease of the RV park there. And there aren't any other 26-acre oceanfront sites in California that are producing that almost nothing.
Yeah. So this has been a great dialogue. We really appreciate that. And for those who, we have someone coming up. It's not over yet. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Peter Whiteman. I happen to live in Morro Bay for many years. My question is pretty simple. Where are these collection points going to be? Has it been decided? And number two, practically, how high do you have to pump to this site from Morro Bay to the top? I haven't heard a figure. And three, I'm not sure whether contracts have been signed, but I hope the contracts are worked that if they do the job in advance of promise, they get a bonus, but if they fail, they get sued. Thank you.
You want to address this? You want to address this question?
Yeah, well, I'll just respond to the lift. So yes, we're pumping from the lowest point of the collection system, which is adjacent to the existing wastewater treatment plant, and the existing, or the water reclamation facility, I believe, is a couple hundred feet higher, not even that. And then we have to pressurize the pipeline to be able to push the flow there. So I believe the total lift is 200 or 300 feet, which is a very typical lift for a pumping system like this.
And could you, where the collection points are, I think was his first question.
Oh, yeah. Losing track of where we are. Yeah, well, we'll just start with this diagram. So here's where the proposed plant will go, and this is the existing plant. So all of the city's wastewater currently comes to the existing wastewater plant, so we would just intercept the flow adjacent to that site, build a pump station, and then pump that flow from that site over in this pipeline to the plant. It's pretty straightforward. We looked at a number of other alternatives, different schemes, different ways to intercept the flow, and this proved out to be the most efficient and economical plan.
Regarding the question on the contracting and how to keep the contractors on schedule, so any of the contracts for construction are going to have time limits, and liquidated damages could be a possibility. We'll look at that when we start putting those together. But that's can be a double-edged sword. But we definitely will have a duration on that contract. There will definitely be conditions if there penalties if they're not met. And that's pretty typical for all the city construction projects.
And I think the other part of that question was, has that happened? And the answer is no. We can't get to that point until we get through the environmental impact report, at which point then the council's in a position to take the information from that and from the public, and this is over the next year, and say, great, we've got a project. That's when they would approve something that then could be put out to bid. And we're looking at that happening at the beginning of 2018. So that's the time frame of when contracts start getting put together. Oh, Jeannie.
So I just wanted a point of clarification. So public comment is welcome through December. Is that correct? Through the end of December?
Public input's welcome all the time. Relative to this question about the facility master plan, it'll be most useful to have by, let's say, the 1st or so of December. The reason I say that is because the Citizen Advisory Committee's meeting on the 6th of December, and they'd benefit greatly to hear what the public has to say as they provide us more detailed technical input. And the City Council on the 13th of December will also benefit from your input. But obviously, we'll take it as we get it, and the process is going to be fluid and dynamic, even into the environmental impact report stage, which will be ongoing into next year.
Okay, given that it's like a 400-page report, and some people don't have computers, are you going to have the report available, say, at the public library or Public Works?
Yes, we'll have printed copies at the library, at the Public Works office, and at City Hall.
Okay, great. And could you get these, the PowerPoint up on the website too?
Yes.
Okay, and then finally...
They'll be on the splash page of the city's website under Hot Topics tomorrow morning.
Okay, great. And, okay, so we've discussed tonight basically the costs for building the plant and also for the O&M costs, but just so that people are aware, we haven't discussed at all the cost of maintaining the existing pipelines. So if there are issues with those pipelines, how is that going to be addressed?
So our existing collection system has been addressed through the rates, so that was added into our existing rate study. So it does account for maintenance of the existing system. That's usually studied through a sanitary sewer master plan, which we're combining with a water master plan and stormwater, and we're calling it one water plan, which will be worked on early next year. So the rates do anticipate maintaining our existing collection system and having other collection system projects. I mean, this collection system was built over time, so it does need to continually be maintained. This isn't the only wastewater project we'll work on over the next few years. We'll have other smaller projects throughout the collection system that need to be done.
Great. Thanks so much for clarifying that.
All right, thank you very much. And it's right about 8 o'clock, but if anyone has any last-minute input, we're happy to hear it. And if not, we have sheets as you leave that you might want to take with you to jot down some questions. Has our address and email address. They'll be directed actually to me, and we'll forward all those throughout the whole project team. Really appreciated your input. And Dave, I don't know if you have any closing comments here, but we really have taken some great input from you tonight. We appreciate that.
No, thank you very much for exceptional dialogue. It was really, really positive. We've come away with a bunch of great notes. All of those things are now part of the record. There's nothing else you need to do. We will ensure that they're appropriately recorded, and we look forward to your continued input over the next 3 weeks so that we can take this to the WRFCAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, on December the 6th. Thanks very much, and good night.
You'll all get, WRFCAC will get printed copies. Probably Wednesday. Yeah. No.
We sent 10 up here last week, and then the other 10 went out of my office.
Okay. I meet with CMB not that long ago. Yeah. I don't think it's much of a decision that needs to be made. I think given the timeline that we have, we really only have one option. It's just what flavor of that one option we pick. I know our city attorney has, his favorite option, which is very conservative. We're still trying to convince him that maybe a more progressive approach would be better. Okay. Yeah.